Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, everybody, I am back. Good to be back. I do want to continue the college football conversation, and I'll say this. In addition to the Jaden Rashada news over the last couple days, we obviously talked a little bit about it on Monday's show. We obviously talked about it on today's show. There has been another story that is worth monitoring and worth discussing from the world of college football that we are certainly going to talk about here today on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, and it is what is going on at the University of Texas in Austin. When we last left Texas, it was about a week or so ago. Last Thursday, you may remember what happened on that day. Oh, yeah, that's right. Arch Manning, grandson of Archie Manning, son of Cooper Manning, nephew of Eli and Peyton Manning, made his college decision, and he committed to Texas. But we're not really here today to talk about Arch Manning. We talked about him last week. I have a lot of thoughts. If you missed that, please go back, download last week's episode. You can also find it on YouTube. But instead, I want to talk about the future of Texas and what is happening since Arch Manning's commitment, because something very important is happening and something worth monitoring on a show like this is happening. Have you seen the recruiting run that Texas is on since Arch Manning committed to Texas? We're going to get into all of the details now, but let me just say this. We talked about it on last Friday's show when Arch Manning committed. The reason you want a player of that caliber is not only because of the impact that he can have on the field, but the impact that he can bring to the rest of the program. And I believe we have seen it in the 4 or 5 days since Arch Manning committed. Let's call it the Arch Manning effect, Arch Madness, whatever you want to call it. It is real, though, Texas fans, and it is fantastic. And so if you don't pay attention to Texas football 365 days a year, I'm guessing most of you don't, many of you, maybe all of you don't. Here's what has happened since Arch Manning committed last Thursday. He commits on Thursday, big weekend for Texas recruiting. This is that time of year for people who don't follow the recruiting calendar religiously. You get a lot of on-campus camps. You get a lot of on-campus visits. You get a lot of FaceTime between top prospects and coaching staffs. And it was a busy weekend for the University of Texas. As I said, Arch committed on Thursday. By the time Sunday night turned into Monday, here is what happened at Texas. They picked up, and I'm going to go full LeBron James on you. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 commitments by Monday morning following the commitment of Arch Manning last Thursday. Included in those 6 commitments that happened over the weekend, Jaden Chapman, 4-star offensive lineman. You want to start winning in the SEC, winning in college football and period, because remember, Texas will be in the SEC before this recruiting class is done in Austin. You got to have the big guys up front. They also got a commitment from a 4-star wide receiver from the city of Houston over the weekend, a kid named Jonah Wilson. Now, I can't sit here and say I'm a recruiting guru, but remember, Texas A&M had a historic, not only a number 1 ranked class, but some would argue the greatest recruiting class of all time last year. And it was in large part because they cleaned up in the city of Houston. So Texas getting a commitment from a 4-star wide receiver, obviously skill position guy out of Houston. Nothing but good news for Texas. And then finally, over the course of the weekend, they also picked up a 4-star linebacker from the state of Hawaii. Beautiful city, beautiful state, by the way. Been there once, hope to go back soon. And if that was all Texas did since Arch Manning committed, it'd be great. But as the old saying goes, but wait, there's more. That's because on Monday, Texas picked up a commitment from 5-star safety Derek Williams. He's from the state of Louisiana, so you know it's big when you go out of state, you go into a soon-to-be SEC rival's backyard, and you get a player that the entire SEC wanted. Derek Williams, now the second highest-rated player in this class behind Arch Manning. Oh, by the way, had offers from basically the entire SEC, including Alabama, Auburn, and others. And then on Tuesday, they got 2 other commitments, at least as I record here at about 6:30 Eastern time. I don't know, by the time I'm done recording, they may pick up another 1 or 2, but they picked up 2 more commitments, including a defensive lineman named Billy Walton. He had originally committed to Oklahoma State, flips to Texas, and why it's important is 2 reasons. 1, He goes to one of the elite high schools in the state of Texas, South Oak Cliff in Dallas. It's also worth noting, he's got a cousin who is also on his high school team, who is also a Texas target, named Malik Muhammad, currently trending to Texas A&M. I'm not trying to discredit Texas A&M in all this. But you go into an elite high school, you get a good player who has an elite cousin, it can't be a bad thing. And so with this recruiting run, we now have 9 commitments as I record, and there may be more by the time I'm done recording this. And on top of the 9 commitments, Texas's recruiting class did this. They went from number 19 in the country before Arch Manning's commit all the way up to number 3 in the country, the number 3 recruiting class behind only Ohio State and Notre Dame. I think I read something where if you just took the kids who committed, if you started with Arch Manning's commitment and only included that class, only included players that committed after Arch Manning and Arch Manning, you would have something like the 6th or 7th best class in the country. So this is an incredible run for Texas. And again, it goes back to what I said. I believe this is a direct reflection of players that want to play with Arch Manning. Now, really quickly, I should share the other side. I try to be fair on all accounts. Well, I think this is great for college football that Texas is recruiting well. I think we all know that there's another side to this. One, Texas just is coming off of 5 and 7 years, so let's not get too excited here. 2, if you really go kind of player by player, 24/7 has this thing called the average recruiting ranking of individual players. Texas's number 3 class is really good, but it's also part of the reason that they're up to number 3 in the country is because they just simply have more commits at this time than most schools, 16 in total. For comparison's sake, I think Alabama has like 8 or 9, something like that. I'd have to look it up. I'm doing it on the fly here, so I'm not going to go ahead and do it. But the point I'm trying to make is if you go player by player, Texas's class is probably in that like 6 to 10 range, more so than it would be in the top 1, 2, 3. And obviously Ohio State's going to continue to recruit well. Notre Dame's going to continue to recruit well. Texas A&M is, Georgia is, Alabama is, etc. And so we're a long way from signing day. Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, Ohio State are a long way from completing their classes. So it is 1 4 or 5 day stretch in recruiting does not make an entire program. But again, if you're looking for positives for Texas, if you're looking for something to use a bad pun, hang your hat on, this is it. And again, this is a direct reflection of what I just talked about and what I talked about last Thursday. This is why it's so important to not only get Arch Manning as a commitment, but to get him as early as you did in June. It was interesting. I actually saw an interview Steve Sarkisian did with Pete Thamel from ESPN, and in that interview, Steve Sarkisian says, it used to be you wanted to get really hot in recruiting in November and December. Now it's like June. You want to get hot this time of year, but it has to center around a quarterback for all of the reasons that we've talked about. When you get a quarterback recruit this early in the process, and by the way, it doesn't matter if you're Texas and it's the number 1 player in the country, or if it's Wake Forest and it's not as highly rated of a guy, or it's Coastal Carolina and it's a guy that a lot of people aren't familiar with. It's important because that quarterback, if he's doing his job as the leader of the recruiting class and a future leader of the program, he's going to go recruit for you and he's going to end up being your best recruiter, and this is what we've talked about. The reason you want Arch Manning is because, yes, he's a little bit different. He doesn't go to all the elite camps, and he's not as involved. But now once he's a Texas Longhorn, he can get on the phone with all these other elite prospects. He can get on the text, DM, however kids communicate these days. I don't know. I still use old-fashioned text messages and maybe an Instagram DM or two, maybe a Twitter DM or two. But Arch Manning now becomes your best recruiter. Arch Manning can now reach out to anyone he wants at any given time. Coaches have restrictions on who they can reach out to and when they can reach out to. There are things called dead periods in recruiting. There's no dead period when one recruit is talking to the other. Arch Manning can text these kids anytime they want from now until that first signing day in December. So it's always important to get a quarterback this early in the process. And it's that much more important to get a quarterback that's the number 1 ranked player in the country with the last name Manning. Because think about it. Again, it's one thing to get a quarterback. Wake Forest is happy if they get a quarterback. Florida International is happy if they have a quarterback at this time to help them recruit. But now think about the fact that Texas not only got a quarterback, they got the number 1 ranked recruit in the high school class with the last name Manning. And so Arch Manning, when he's texting or DMing or doing whatever he does to help Texas recruit, think about the impact that it can have on other kids. Now, every kid's not going to choose Texas. There's a lot of great options. For an Alabama fan listening, you still have a great program. I'm not saying Texas is coming for your crown tomorrow. Georgia, you're going to do well. Texas A&M, USC, Ohio State, Michigan, you're all going to recruit well. That's not what this is about. But what it is about is that Arch Manning is now recruiting on Texas's behalf, and when he reaches out to kids, it carries weight. Because Arch Manning could have gone to any of these other schools. He could have gone to Georgia. They were in his final 3. He could have gone to Alabama. They were in his final 3. But he said, I want to go to Texas. I want to be the guy that when Texas gets to from the Big 12 to the SEC, I'm going to be the guy that's one of the leaders of this program. I'm going to be the guy that brings in the other guys that help us compete at the highest level when we go into the best conference in college football. So if Texas is good enough for me, and I could have gone to Georgia and Alabama, it darn well is good enough for you. And so again, for the final time, I know that some of you are A&M fans. I know that some of you are Alabama fans. Some of you are probably, I don't know, Kentucky fans or Louisville fans or whatever. And I know that some of you are like, Torres, you guys in the media, you're always hyping up Texas. This isn't a June national championship. They used to call Mac Brown Mr. February because he always delivered in February and never in November and December. This is not me proclaiming Texas is back. This is not me saying that Arch is going to do this or Texas is going to do that. But again, as I always say on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, I'm doing the show right now. And I have to base my opinions based on the information that we have now. Now, for all we know, Texas could not sign another kid or not get another commitment between now and signing day and end up with 16 total commits in the 20th class in America. Some kids could decommit. Some kids could recommit. Some kids could go other places. Once Arch gets to campus, there's no guarantee how he's going to be. And yes, I understand that to win at the highest level of college football, you have to stack class on class on class on class on class. It's why I think Texas A&M fans understand that this probably isn't the year for Texas A&M. I think the public thinks it's the year for Texas A&M. I think most fans think, you know what? 2023 has really got to be the year for us because that's when all these classes are going to mature into sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And so I understand that Texas not only has to have a top 5 class this year like they did, they got to make sure to close in 2023 and finish with a top 5 class next year. And then if you get another top 5 class after that, then maybe by the time you get to the SEC, you're starting to be on the fringes of what Alabama and Georgia are now. And then maybe with another one, you'll be able to win a title. So I'm not sitting here proclaiming anything for Texas. But this is why you wanted Arch Manning. And you wanted Arch Manning because he's awesome. But you wanted Arch Manning early to help you recruit. And I cannot help but think that when you get 9 players committed in the 4 days after this kid commits, including 1 5-star and 3 additional 4-stars, that a lot of this has to do with Arch Manning.